Welcome to our video lecture on topic D3.1 Reproduction in Animals. Our guiding questions: how does asexual or sexual reproduction exemplify themes of continuity and change? And what changes within organisms are required for reproduction? Our objectives for today: we're going to contrast asexual and sexual reproduction, talk about the rules of meiosis in sexual reproduction, we're going to describe the structures and functions of the human male and female reproductive systems, we're going to explain the hormonal control of the human menstrual cycle, talk about fertilization in us humans, and then describe IVF. We humans and most other organisms engage in sexual reproduction. This image is showing a pair of earthworms trading gametes, making some worm babies. One of the disadvantages of sexual reproduction is that two parents are required. Organisms of a species need to find another organism of that same species. That is different from asexual reproduction, which is what is happening here with this hydra. Only one parent is required. However, a disadvantage of asexual reproduction is that the offspring are genetically identical. This bud of the hydra is going to be a clone of the parent hydra, whereas the baby worms that are being formed from these fertilized eggs are going to be genetically diverse. That diversity is a result of meiosis and crossing over, and then we end up with new combinations of traits in the offspring that allows the species to adapt to changes in the environment. In asexual reproduction, we rely only on mitosis, and there is no propagation of genetic variation. This is great if the environment is not changing, but if there are changes, it might be hard for that species to adapt without variation. And we just mentioned that meiosis is a requirement for sexual reproduction. Meiosis is when we take some super cool diploid cells and we chop the number of chromosomes in those cells in half as we produce haploid cells, haploid eggs and sperm. Those are known as gametes. Because meiosis results in the reduction of chromosome number, we sometimes call meiosis reduction division. During fertilization, what happens is an egg and a sperm meet each other and they go back to diploid. For us humans, diploid number is 46. And so our haploid number is 23. And if we have a sperm cell that has 23 chromosomes and an egg cell that has 23 chromosomes, and these two guys fertilize each other, we end up with a zygote, that fertilized cell, that goes back to 46 chromosomes or that diploid number. Lots of mitosis for lots of growth, and then during adulthood, more meiosis will result in more eggs and sperm, and then the whole cycle can happen again. What's kind of cool about gametes, sometimes they are equally sized. That is known as isogamy. Some fungi have equally sized gametes, eggs and sperm, same size, isogamy. We humans, a lot of other animals and plants, have, instead of equally sized gametes, we have unequal sized, and this is known as anisogamy. Our very large egg cells compared to our very small male sperm cells is this anisogamy, not equal sized. What's kind of interesting about us humans, our egg cells have lost the ability to move. We call that sessile, as opposed to the mobile sperm cells that have those flagella that allow them to swim around. Our egg cells that are sessile are very large and have a lot of food reserves for development. And then we also only produce a very few numbers of these larger egg cells, whereas the sperm cells, not a lot of food reserves stored in them, and we make, oh my gosh, millions and millions every single day. And those millions of sperm are produced in the testes. Testes are these organs that produce sperm and testosterone. When those sperm are produced, they are sent to the epididymis for storage. All of this is sitting in the scrotum, which hangs outside of the body, so that sperm production can happen at a slightly lower temperature than human body temperature. Once sperm is produced, if it is not ejaculated within 24 hours, it dies and is reabsorbed into the body. Pieces and parts are used to make more sperm or other stuff. However, if ejaculation does occur, then the sperm will be transported through this duct known as the sperm duct. It's going to transport the sperm past a couple glands. The first gland we're going to look at are the seminal vesicles. There are 2 of them on either side of the body. they are going to add some fructose to the semen. This is going to provide energy for the sperm because they've got a lot of swimming to do. The next gland that the sperm are going to pass by is the prostate gland. The prostate gland is going to add an alkali solution so that the sperm are protected from the acidity of the vagina. Then all of this stuff, the semen, is going to pass through the urethra. The urethra is that tube that is going to carry the sperm, the semen, outside of the body during ejaculation. The urethra also carries urine from the bladder. Here's the bladder. We're going to carry urine from the bladder out of the body, also through the urethra during urination. Finally, the job of the whole entire penis that includes the urethra is to penetrate the vagina so that that semen can be released very close to the cervix and get the sperm into the uterus for fertilization. And again, the function of the penis is to get the semen with the sperm released as close as possible to the cervix. The cervix is here. It is this opening between the uterus, this crazy strong muscle, and the vagina, the birth canal. The outside of the vagina is the vulva. Its job is to protect all of these internal organs of the female reproductive system. The uterine walls have endometrium, these layers, this lining that can thicken and then be released. The thickening of the endometrium allows for implantation of an embryo and then nourishment of the embryo in the developing fetus. That embryo is the result of fertilization. If fertilization occurs, it is going to happen in this tube known as the oviduct. We can also call it the fallopian tube. We are more often going to use oviduct as our term. That egg is going to be released from the ovary. We have two ovaries. Ovaries produce eggs. They also produce estradiol, one of our versions of estrogen, and also progesterone. So that egg is going to be released. It is transported through the oviduct. If fertilization occurs, it will occur in the oviduct. It will continue to be transported into the uterus. And then again, if fertilization occurs, implantation of that embryo will happen here. If fertilization does not occur, then the endometrium will be sloughed off and then another cycle will begin. And that cycle is known as the menstrual cycle. In us humans, there are two main phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. We're going to focus on changes in two organs during these phases, the ovaries and then the uterine wall that we're going to call the endometrium. During the follicular phase, we are going to develop follicles. Follicles are chunks of cells in the ovaries that help to mature an egg. So the follicle is developing, the egg in the follicle is developing. When the follicle is mature, when the egg is ready, then that egg is going to pop out of the follicle. This is known as ovulation. Ovulation is the releasing of the egg from the follicle. What is left behind, that follicle that is now a wound from where the egg erupted, is now called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum's job is to produce lots of hormones to support pregnancy should fertilization occur. If fertilization does not occur, that corpus luteum is going to degrade, stop producing hormones, and then the cycle can start all over again. In the uterine wall, the endometrium, during the follicular phase, hormones are going to cause the endometrium to thicken, thicken, thicken in readiness for implantation of a fertilized egg. If fertilization does not occur, then that lining is going to degrade. It is going to be released from the body, and this is known as menses, or more commonly, this is a human's period. At the start of the follicular phase, the first couple days are actually just trying to repair that endometrium before we start to thicken that lining all over again for the next cycle. All of this is controlled by hormones. We're going to look at two hormones that are produced by the pituitary and then two other hormones that are produced by the ovaries. The first hormone that we're going to look at is one of our pituitary hormones, and it is FSH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. Can you guess what follicle stimulating hormones stimulate? Well, that would be development of the follicles, of course. So FSH is going to be released by the pituitary. It is going to stimulate the development of the follicles, the maturation of those eggs. It is also going to stimulate the release of estrogen, specifically estradiol, one of our 3 different classes of estrogen hormones. So this estradiol is going to be released from the ovaries, and that is going to cause this increase in estradiol is going to lead to thickening of the endometrium. And then this peak here is going to lead to this huge surge in LH. LH is the other pituitary hormone that we're going to look at. LH stands for luteinizing hormone. The job of the luteinizing hormone is ovulation. And so this big peak, that surge in LH, is what releases the egg from the follicle. Progesterone is the last hormone that we're going to look at. Progesterone's job is to thicken and then also maintain the thickness of the endometrium should implantation occur. Progesterone, this high level of progesterone here, is also going to inhibit the production of LH and FSH. That is going to be some negative feedback, because if implantation occurs, if there is a pregnancy, then we definitely don't want to start releasing more eggs. So an increase in progesterone leads to a decrease in FSH, which means no more eggs are being produced. However, if there is no implantation, then that progesterone level will fall, that menses or period will commence, and then FSH can start to rise again. We'll stimulate another follicle to develop, we'll have that ovulation, and then the whole thing happens all over again. I mentioned a few times in that previous slide, should fertilization occur? Here we're going to look at what exactly does occur in fertilization. First, though, we need to talk about the anatomy of an egg and of a sperm. The egg is a cell. It's a really big cell. It's got a lot of cytoplasm. It's got some genetic material. It has a cell membrane. Outside that cell membrane is a jelly coat that we're going to call the zona pellucida. Embedded, stuck in that jelly, is the corona radiata. These are just some cells from the follicle of the ovary that got stuck in that jelly coat. Inside the cell membrane in the cytoplasm are these cortical granules, and we're going to talk about the cortical in just a second. The sperm is much, much smaller than the egg. Here's an egg. Here's a little sperm. The sperm are much smaller than the egg cells. They have a head. In the head is an acrosome. The acrosome contains enzymes that allow it to dig a hole through the zona pellucida. That zona pellucida is super protective of the egg inside. These enzymes in the acrosome allow for the sperm to get through that zona pellucida. Just behind the acrosome is the nucleus of the sperm, and then lots of mitochondria next to that flagella for lots and lots of swimming. During fertilization, what occurs is, again, that acrosome is going to release those enzymes. The enzymes are going to digest a hole through the zona pellucida. The nucleus of the sperm cell is then released into the cytoplasm of the egg cell. When that happens, it stimulates those cortical granules that we looked at here. These granules of cortical are going to be released into the zona pellucida. The cortical plus the zona pellucida is going to result in the hardening of that jelly coat into not jelly anymore, but a layer that the acrosomes can no longer get through. That is going to prevent multiple sperm from trying to fertilize that egg. Clearly, lots of sperm are attracted to and trying to fertilize the egg. We only want one nucleus inside the egg. Once that first guy gets in there, cortical granules harden the zona pellucida, no more sperm. Some humans may not be able to or may not want to get pregnant by those natural methods, and so we have this technology, IVF, as a backup plan. IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. Vitro means glass. This is done by manipulating lots and lots of hormone levels. Generally, the first part of an IVF treatment is the downregulation of FSH. This just means that we're pretty much putting a pause on the menstrual cycle so that doctors can control the timing of everything. That is followed by a very high dose, extra high dose of FSH, that follicle stimulating hormone. Usually, only one follicle is going to mature during each cycle. With IVF, it's 8 to 15 follicles are going to be stimulated. A little bit of HCG is then also added to the subject, to the patient. HCG is human chorionic gonadotropin. Human chorionic gonadotropin. This is going to help speed up the maturation of the eggs. Those eggs, 8 to 15 of them, are then extracted from the ovary and they are fertilized in glass, in vitro. The resulting embryos are allowed to develop, usually for about 48 hours, and then the healthy embryos can be implanted into the uterus along with some progesterone that is going to help to maintain that endometrium lining so that those embryos can be implanted. One risk of in vitro fertilization is definitely multiple births. Doctors generally don't put just one embryo into the uterus because viability is not very high. Many of the embryos will die before they implant, and so by implanting multiples, you have a better chance of success, but then you also have a better chance of multiple babies. And on that note, my friends, we have achieved all of our objectives. We contrasted asexual and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction, super helpful when the environment is not changing. Sexual reproduction, more helpful when it is. We talked about the rules of meiosis in sexual reproduction, producing those gametes so that we can have fertilization occur. We talked about structures and functions of the human male and female reproductive systems. We talked about the hormonal control of the human menstrual cycle, those 4 hormones that are so important for that cycle. We talked about fertilization, those different stages involved, and then IVF as a backup plan for natural methods of pregnancy. Great work today, my friends.